Do you use AI? Like, do you guys do AI? What does that even mean? What are you talking about? A lot of retailers or merchants that I had like various conversations with in more social settings, not necessarily like, business conversation, they were organically bringing it up to me. Everyone's talking about agentic. First, our maturity curve, so we're still in baby phases. A lot of merchants are like, we don't even know like what to do. And when someone says agentic commerce, we're not even sure what they're talking about. A bot shopping for you? Are you talking about agentic search and discovery? Are you talking about, like there's so many parts of that experience, right? Some of the merchants I spoke with were like, we're not doing what people think we're doing. I think NRF is always worth it. I think it's worth it for vendors to go, and I do think it's worth it for retailers to go. Although I will say it's overwhelming. There's so much going on. And I swear every year it gets more interactive on the expo, floor and on the side events and I think like Ryan Reynolds was speaking, which is so crazy. Like they got like they're following in like the Salesforce path and trying to get like celebrities. And so it's, a spectacle for sure. But I think the biggest value add of NRF as an event is simply just bumping into people, frankly. I mean, you do, as a vendor, I've been there, I think I've been going to NRF for probably 10 years now with various companies. And I think the organic part of it is probably the most useful. Of course, as a vendor, you want to you want to book meetings and you want to have events and you want to try to get FaceTime and like schedule those things. But if you go enough times, you actually bump into people that you've known either in past lives or past jobs or whatever. I think the very first person I bumped into the first day I went to the expo floor because I had a meeting. Right before my meeting, I bumped into an old colleague from my last job. He now works for Shopify, ironically. And so that was really fun. That was like the first person I bumped into. And it was so fun because it was like a sea of 40,000 people. What are the chances that I would bump into this old coworker? And it was really nice. I think merchants are overwhelmed. Like I was saying, NRF is a very useful trade show to go to for many reasons. I mean, if like, let's say you're a small brand or like a challenger brand and you really are trying to find like new technology or clean up your tech stack or just see who the players are in, depending on what you're shopping for, right? Like platform versus post-purchase versus commerce protection, right? It's good to see like who all the players are, but not a lot of business is getting done at NRF. And people know that, right? Like you go because you're building relationships and that's the fun part. But for me, it's a consistency game. You go every single year and this is the big one that kicks off the year. And then you go to the next event, which is e-tail. And then you go to the next one, which is Shop Talk. And then you go to MRC and then you go to whatever. And so it's a consistency and a visibility and a relationship building mechanism. It's certainly not like people are not signing contracts at NRF, right? Like that's not happening and that's fine. That's totally fine. Like you just have to go into it with the right set of expectations. I didn't have time to see much, but I have been to some of those sessions in the past, either at NRF or like Shop Talk, which is the other big, huge kind of tentpole event. And I think a lot of that is, a lot of it's marketing, right? Like marketing for your own, either, like getting around Ryan Reynolds to stand up there and talk about building a brand. It's like, he's an actor. Like, sure, he's invested in companies and good on him for, he's got a diverse portfolio of gin and soccer and, like financial SaaS companies, whatever, Mint Mobile. So like, great, that's great. But, he's not a born merchant, right? And so that's marketing to me, clearly. Like clearly that is NRF saying like, this is a show you want to be at because you want to like, maybe rub shoulders or see somebody interesting speak. But I don't think merchants are learning the ABCs of retail and being a merchant from Ryan Reynolds. I don't think that they're, learning a lot of new stuff, but maybe that's just me being a little pessimistic. Let's jump in though. Let's talk about Agentic. I will say if anyone's been around for the last 15 to 20 years in retail in general, what I've felt, I was getting a little PTSD around 15, 20 years ago when omnichannel was the big buzzword for retailers. Omnichannel fulfillment and, managing across multiple channels, brick and mortar, wholesale, online. And like omnichannel is still kind of a very complicated thing for retailers to achieve. It's really not a lot of retailers do it very well. So I thought that hearing agentic commerce all week was kind of becoming a little bit of an ick word because it's very general, right? So the first problem is it's such a blanket. It's like saying, do you use AI? Like, do you guys do AI? It's like, that is a very, like, what does that even mean? What are you talking about? The other interesting thing was a lot of retailers or merchants that I had like various conversations with in more social settings, not necessarily like, business conversation, they were organically bringing it up to me that they're like, everyone's talking about agentic, but first, our maturity curve is we're still in baby phases. A lot of merchants are like, we don't even know what to do. And when someone says agentic commerce, we're not even sure what they're talking about. Are they talking about a bot shopping for you? Are you talking about agentic search and discovery? Are you talking about, like there's so many parts of that experience, right? And so some of the merchants I spoke with were like, we're not doing what people think we're doing. Right? Like everybody thinks we're so like, oh, we're into like agentic commerce and we're still figuring it out as an organization was kind of the theme I saw. And I think that rings true with me as a consumer. I'm not necessarily letting a robot or an agent do any kind of shopping for me, even for like things like toothpaste, things that I refill, like replenishment goods. I'm not there yet, as a consumer. And so certainly merchants they're saying to me that we're not there yet either, even though everyone wants to talk about it. And it doesn't mean it's not going to happen. I do think, it'll happen in some flavor and it'll continue to evolve and kind of shapeshift. But I think the perception is that merchants are already in this agentic commerce world. The biggest thing that I saw, there's a couple of really interesting things. I think there's still a huge gap in agentic discovery and using like a Perplexity or a ChatGPT or, like using those engines. Now we're kind of going from SEO, which was kind of the old school, so search engine optimization, to like now we're calling it like GEO or AEO, like agentic, right? And so that discovery piece is becoming more agentic and more, of an agentic experience. But what isn't happening is kind of going from agentic discovery and search to also like an agentic transaction or conversion. And I feel there's still a really big gap in the middle because I can't go on to, let's say ChatGPT, search for a leather jacket, get all the recommendations personalized, hopefully, and then do a one-click, boop, I want that, get it to my door without leaving that session. Like that doesn't exist anywhere really. The first movers obviously are going to, Shopify's talking about it right now. So the second piece, so I think there's a big gap in that, right? I think there's a gap in that the consumer journey, which would be, really merchants serving up that agentic like experience for consumers. I don't think we're there yet. Because I think what happens is you might do your search on ChatGPT, get the information you need, close your laptop, close your phone, and then a day later, go to the merchant's website yourself. So that attribution isn't there right now, right? Because that experience stops when you're like, great, you gave me the information. Now I'm going to actually go to that merchant's website 2 days later and just do that transaction because I already have that information. But we haven't really like stitched together that entire journey. So that's one thing. The first movers that I think are, I wouldn't say doing it, but again, launching things to enable this, Shopify, no surprise, came out with a big announcement on Monday during NRF all around their like product kind of syndication across agentic platforms for Shopify merchants. So that means if you are a merchant that uses Shopify as their storefront, you are now in a pool of a bunch of other merchants that when I'm looking on, ChatGPT or something for a leather jacket again, hopefully your product's going to pop to the top when I search, right? But you kind of don't, on Shopify, they're saying you don't really have a choice. You're going to be kind of in this pool of inventory because they've got everyone's inventory data, right? Because they are the shop front, the storefront for these merchants. And so they're basically going to be syndicated across all of these agentic platforms during that like search and discovery kind of piece. And so it's like content syndication, but for products, if that makes sense. First of all, it's great for merchants if it's like, hey, you are already in this bucket of, it's almost like one huge eBay kind of, right? Like one huge marketplace, but with all the merchants are the sellers, right? But I think the adjacency piece might be very weird for brands. And I haven't done enough like unscientific surveying to know but I just know from my own experience, like brand adjacency, whether it's within marketing or search or wherever, it's very sensitive, right, for these brands. And so I don't know if that's kind of like you just sign your life away because you're a Shopify merchant. And it's like, too bad you might pop up right next to your exact, competitor. I don't know. I think it's a great question. I don't know how much control they have if that's just kind of like what's going to happen. They're going to be like, well, you're included in this. I think the other piece is, maybe the thought is it will encourage healthy competition between, like SEO optimization back in the day, right? Like, how do you get your search, your website or whatever to the top of the heap when someone's searching for something? So maybe it will encourage, an AEO optimization kind of push for these merchants to make sure that their stuff gets to the top of the results, when they're searching in GPT or whatever. So, I suppose for a certain portion or segment of the market, but those that are on the really upmarket high end of the spectrum, they're doing their own thing, right? So I think I read Target had completely revamped their mobile app last year. I think maybe they're still doing it, and I should actually probably go and test this myself, but they announced a partnership with ChatGPT where their mobile app would sit on top of ChatGPT to basically, it's almost like they would white label, right? And then that would be their, kind of agentic shopping experience, but it would just be the Target app, basically, like sitting on top of that. So Target doesn't need Shopify. Obviously, they're Target. And they've got a lot of development, teams in-house that can do that. But like a mid-market or a small enterprise company, they don't have the resources to do something like that, right? To make their mobile app agentic, for lack of a better word. So I think the really big guys are obviously doing their own development and figuring out ways to partner with these platforms themselves. And then I think the smaller ones that are on Shopify, or the ones, that are, I wouldn't say smaller because there's a lot of enterprise folks on Shopify, they'll kind of just automatically be in this kind of product syndication boat, and then I guess there's people in the middle. I don't know, that have to figure out their strategy. I haven't heard of, like, for example, Commerce Cloud, Salesforce. I don't know if they're doing something similar. I don't know. These platforms have so much really rich and important data, like product data. And so I would assume Shopify or Salesforce is probably doing something similar, maybe. I think that's kind of the first point that you can make if, someone is worrying about, like we were just talking about, like brand adjacency. And it's like, well, you're gonna get the revenue up, like wherever it comes from, especially in this environment where it's so competitive and the economy is a little unknown. It's kind of like, just be happy that you're getting that that revenue spike, from a new channel that you're getting as a benefit of working with this vendor, with Shopify, right? So it's kind of like, I think there's definitely that storyline of like, hey, a sale is a sale, right? At the end of the day. And this is just like thinking about how, if you're branding, you sell through direct to consumer, so your own website, you sell in your own brick and mortar stores, you sell through wholesale, right? Wholesale is, hey, not my store, it's Bloomingdale's or Saks or whomever. That's still a sale. You have still sold that in a wholesale capacity. So this is really that fourth kind of like a fourth channel, if you will. And so there are probably a lot of merchants that are like, this is great. It's just another way, whether or not it's going to cannibalize or, you're trading, right? It's not, I don't know that it's necessarily going to be incremental. We'll see, right? But like, it may just be more trading between channels. Shopify was kind of like on a lot of people's radar at NRF this week because they're Shopify and they make a big splash at the trade show. So last year, at the end of last year, Shopify announced that Estee Lauder was coming over to their platform, which was a huge shakeup because Estee is, like the biggest kind of mass market beauty brand, been around for, 150 years or whatever. And so that was a huge announcement and a big win for Shopify because they've just been trying really hard to go up market for a long time, right? They started as an SMB brand or, vendor storefront. And so that was just a big, I think, vote of confidence that they could get, they could get a big whale like Estee. But what I've actually been seeing, and whether or not Estee is driving some of this kind of like inherent decisioning or not, I'm not sure. But it feels like there are larger brands going to Shopify from either a competitor, maybe Commerce Cloud, or maybe they had some kind of like broken system internally and they want to go somewhere that's more out of the box that they can get a lot of stuff off the shelf. Shopify, one thing they do really well is they've got this great closed kind of ecosystem that is, you can kind of pick and choose and build your stack right within kind of the Shopify world. But I have a lot of larger brands going to Shopify. But conversely, I actually spoke with someone at a very, very small SMB brand during an event, and he feels that Shopify has really just forgotten their SMB roots. Right. It's kind of like they're still bringing on small and medium sized businesses, and then they sign them and they just kind of like don't pay attention to them. And so the kind of feeling in the community at the mid-market level is that I don't know if I want to stay with Shopify because they're actually not being a good partner to me. And I can actually find competitors that have the same kind of configurability and out of the box kind of functionality that I need. And the third piece is, but are willing to build a relationship with me, right? Because that was always the thing with Shopify. Is like, we'll grow with you. But now it's almost like they signed Estee and they're like, oh, all these little brands, like who? And so I had people saying they're actually like leaving Shopify for other competitors. I think there was one competitor who I had to do a little research on called Storeline, who same thing, like e-commerce storefront built for SMB. So it was a very interesting. It felt, there's a lot of kind of trading up and down and movement on the platform kind of side of the house. And so we'll see how that shakes out. I only know this kind of anecdotally from some folks that I chatted to, even just this as recent as this week. But I think a few things, retailers are constantly looking for that strategic partner to grow with. And regardless of what part of their stack they're looking at, whether it's, an ERP or an e-com platform or a commerce protection platform, they're really looking for people that can future-proof with them, right? So not like buying something again in like 2 years, because that's a lot of work, right? So they need someone that can grow with them. And I think the problem I've heard, and again, this is just hearsay, is that Shopify does not scale well. Once you hit a certain GMV, I think merchants have felt that the wheels a little bit start falling off the bus as you get up again. And whether or not that has to do with unit velocity on the site, or I'm not sure, like there's a lot to unpack when people say like, oh, it doesn't scale well. That's a very general term, of course, but that is the sentiment that I've gotten verbally from people saying that they were built for small business and they still deliver and enable in a small business kind of capacity. And so that's also interesting because if they're bringing on a company like Estee, who has very high expectations, really high throughput, right, really high unit velocity, that should be an interesting partnership to see. I don't know, maybe they built something great that is gonna, scale with Estee, and then everybody will be happy. And I don't know if scaling means like their underlying kind of like hosting is bad. They work with both AWS and GCP, so I don't know what exactly is the issue there. But operators, they did also have this actually happened on Tuesday, and we were at a side of it, like we were at our dinner that we hosted. And I won't name this person because I don't want to call them out. His company's on Shopify, and I guess their point of sale, like their POS functionality, went down for an hour on Tuesday this week. And again, I was like, I don't know the root cause or anything like that, but like he was not happy, and he was like, we were already thinking of leaving Shopify, and I was like, ooh, okay. So it's things like that. Like you hear these things when you're like just in with these merchants and you're like having dinner or like having a drink, and it's like, wow, this is like real stuff happening. He was like a COO, so he's the one making the decision. Figuring out the returns personalization piece of the equation is really big for merchants. Like merchants have done a lot of work over the last 5 years of figuring out how to personalize and using, artificial intelligence and, using all the tools and all the things to figure out on the purchase side how to know about your customer, right? But I do think the personalization on the inbound side is still, I wouldn't say it's a new topic, but it's like figuring out how much you can, know about your customer and using a lot of the intelligence you actually have about their purchase behavior in the returns experience, right? It's like you're sitting on so much great data, and you've spent a lot of time, you merchant has spent a lot of time personalizing and making those experiences really, really, there's a lot of precision in that, right? And now take all that great data and work with a partner that maybe has some more data that you don't have, right? Because you only have what's inside your four walls, and figure out how to make that returns experience, how to turn that into a growth engine and not, just total leakage, right? Like you're just getting all sorts of stuff back. You're letting way too many people in, or you're not letting enough people in, right? So it's like we talked about kind of flipping that script of like, treating those customers, the best customers, the way you always have wanted to treat them. That should be across the entire customer journey. That should not just be at the point of purchase or post purchase. That should be all the way through to returns and beyond, right? So making sure that you're taking care of them and not stopping them at that point of return so that they'll come back and continue to shop with you. I think retail is still alive and well. That is one of the sentences. The retail is still alive and well. And the most exciting and fascinating thing about retail over the years, having been in this industry for so long, is it doesn't really matter what kind of challenge comes their way, right? Merchants always find ways to adapt and move forward. And, the retail landscape is constantly changing. Sure, it's stressful and there's a lot of things going on and there's a lot of unknowns. But this industry has come so far in the last 5 years. So it's really fascinating. So it's still alive and well, and it's going to get there. They may not really know what they're doing with agentic commerce yet, but merchants will figure it out. It's just, there's a little work to be done. But yeah, it's exciting. I think it's still a really exciting time in retail.